immediately claiming central space, preparing pawn advances and opening diagonals for swift development. Initiating the Sicilian defense, black immediately contests central space and opens lines for aggressive counterplay. Instantly claiming central influence, this knight development prepares for pawn advances and targets black's potential queenside expansion. Developing a knight here supports central control and prepares for rapid piece activity, adding a solid foundation to black's position. Targeting black's central pawn structure immediately sets a tense positional battle, forcing uncomfortable choices. Preparing a fianchetto of the bishop, black aims for robust kingside defense and potential counterplay on the d-file. Securing the king immediately prioritizes safety, preparing to launch an attack on the queen side. Solidifying the fianchetto, the bishop now eyes the long diagonal, ready to influence central squares. Solidifying the d4 pawn advance, this prepares to develop further and control central territory. Developing another piece, nf6, black shores up the center and prepares for further central expansion, maintaining dynamic equilibrium. Challenging the center pawn opens crucial diagonals for piece development and central pressure. Opening the center's central file, black accepts the challenge for central dominion and invites a more dynamic game. Opens the c-file for potential piece activity and prepares to develop the queen. Boldly capturing the pawn creates immediate central tension and forces white to react to this aggressive central intrusion. Pushing the pawn now opens lines while forcing the knight to retreat, creating a dangerous central pawn chain for white. Repositioning the knight to d6 immediately contests the pawn on d5, aiming to disrupt white's central grip and open lines for counterplay. Unpinning the knight and aiming for queenside pressure, a subtle repositioning for potential future advances. Challenging the bishop, black aims to gain central space and potentially launch a kingside attack, though this may weaken the queenside pawn structure. Retreating the bishop clarifies the d-pawn's advance and prepares for a kingside castling defense. Asserting pressure on the queenside and threatening a knight fork, this maneuver disrupts white's carefully constructed pawn chain and opens new attacking avenues. Retreating the bishop offers greater scope, preparing to influence the queenside squares and potentially support a future queenside pawn advance. Securing the king's safety is paramount, allowing for future attacking potential by castling. Reasserting central presence, this knight aims to dislodge black's cramped pieces and open avenues for queenside development. Saddling the knight to the edge of the board creates a potential target and surrenders central influence for now. Unleashing pressure on the queenside, this bishop finds a biting diagonal. Asserting central influence and initiating a queenside pawn thrust to disrupt white's piece development. Challenging black's central control, this bishop repositions to potentially exploit weaknesses and restrict knight mobility. Relinquishing the bishop sacrifices valuable central control and opens lines that might be difficult to manage later. Unleashing a knight to pressure the d-pawn, this maneuver initiates a dynamic battle for central control and opens avenues for attacking the weakened kingside. Exposing the dark squares around your king, this pawn push invites tactical skirmishes and weakens the queenside structure. Seeking to disrupt black's knight placement, this maneuver initiates a strategic realignment to exploit the open central files. Shattering the central structure, black grabs a tempo, aiming to disrupt white's knight placement and exploit the open lines. Opening the file offers attacking prospects, aiming to exploit the isolated queenside pawn structure. Boldly challenging the queen, this repositions your forces to eye the queenside and prepare for potential pawn advances, creating dynamic imbalances. Creating a pawn chain on the queenside might seem appealing, but it prematurely defines your structure and offers black centralized targets. Exploring the queenside pawn structure with this knight redeployment promises increased attacking potential, although it does invite counterplay on the kingside. Seizing the open file with the rook immediately puts pressure on black's central pawns. Reclaiming the open e-file with the rook establishes vital central influence, and prepares for potential pawn advances. Shifting the rook to attack the queenside pawns opens an unexpected diagonal for the queen. Centralizing the queen opens up new avenues for piece activity, challenging the rook's dominion on the open file. Seizing the open file, white initiates a sharp tactical sequence aiming to exploit black's somewhat exposed king. Recapturing the pawn reshapes the queenside dynamics, aiming to neutralize white's attacking potential on the open files. The rook's repositioning aims to disrupt black's queenside influence and potentially create attacking chances on the kingside. Reclaiming piece activity, black repositions their bishop to eye white's advanced rook and bolster central influence. Activating the queen to target potential pawn weaknesses and prepare for an endgame. Sharpening the central pressure while eyeing the queenside is a sharp gambit, a calculated risk. Shifting the rook to an active, open file clears the way for potential central pawn advances. This aggressive knight sortie aims to disrupt white's queenside structure and potentially win material. Challenging black's centralized queen, this maneuver aims to disrupt coordination and exploit potential weaknesses on the queenside. That knight's audacious leap into the enemy camp suddenly creates critical attacking possibilities on the c2 square. Simplifying the position after this exchange opens up a clearer path toward controlling the open files. Capturing the queen opens up doubled pawns, potentially hindering coordination and creating weaknesses. Capturing that rook on a8 seizes control of an open file, a crucial advantage in this emerging endgame scenario. This rook capture reclaims material parity, opening a crucial avenue for your remaining pieces to disrupt white's structural weaknesses. Gaining queenside space now seeks to exploit the open files and create passed pawns. Prioritizing king safety is paramount now, steering your monarch away from the exposed central files and potential tactical threats. Securing the king's path and preparing pawn advances, this cautiously builds the royal defense. Challenging the pawn structure with this pawn thrust immediately disrupts white's intended queenside expansion and opens crucial lines for black's rook. The rook's advance into the enemy's camp suddenly seizes control of the open file, potentially creating havoc. Consolidating the king's safety is paramount as the queens are off the board. Opening the queenside expanse for potential infiltration, this pawn push immediately challenges black's centralized knight. Opening the file for the rook is a natural consequence, aiming to contest control and exploit the weakened structure after the exchange. Solidifying the central pawn chain to stifle black's rook activity on the 7th rank. The king ventures out, seeking active participation but exposing itself to potential future attacks along the semi-open files. Challenging black's exposed rook immediately, forcing it to retreat and consolidate white's growing central influence. Recapturing the bishop revitalizes black's central pawn structure, aiming to unlock the queenside for counterplay. Repositioning the rook aims to gain more central influence and potentially harass black's isolated pawns. A bold regrouping, the knight ventures into enemy territory, seeking to disrupt white's coordinated pieces. Reclaiming the b-file allows for pawn advances and potential pressure on black's queenside structure. A daring knight dive, seeking to disrupt white's control and create chaos in the ranks. Recapturing the pawn on c2 now, while tactically sound, allows black to consolidate their knight's position and potentially launch a renewed assault. That knight's return to a1 looks like a desperate attempt to escape the discovered attack and regroup. Hoping to lure the black knight into a trap on the kingside, threatening the rook's escape. Reactivating the king's central influence is a priority now, as the passed pawns will soon demand attention. Relocating the rook opens a crucial diagonal for potential counterplay against black's isolated king. The knight, having traversed the board, now seeks to exploit the slightly exposed white kingside pawns. The rook retreats, repositioning to support the knight's exploration while white seeks pawn weaknesses. Returning the knight to a1 is a curious repositioning, perhaps aiming for a subtle re-engagement on the kingside or a defensive shuffle. Unlocking the open c-file forces the knight to retreat and opens a path for the rook. The king ventures out, seeking sanctuary from the encroaching rook and the awkward pawn structure, but its journey could lead to further complications. Reclaiming the d4 outpost, the knight prepares to disrupt black's rook activity. Reactivating the knight after being hemmed in offers a glimmer of counterplay, though black's material disadvantage remains a significant hurdle. The knight repositions aggressively to e6, targeting the crucial f4 square and preparing a potential kingside siege. Relocating the knight to a more active square bypasses the current pinning and prepares a counterattack. Repositioning the rook to the 8th rank immediately threatens the knight and begins a powerful rook infiltration. Igniting a desperate pawn advance in a bleak endgame, aiming to complicate matters with unexpected dynamism. The rook captures, aiming to liquidate material and simplify into a potentially favorable rook endgame. Seeking respite from the rook's pressure, the knight endeavors to activate, though its placement invites further tactical skirmishes. The rook swings to the queenside flank, aiming to pry open the isolated knight's defensive posture.